Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Astrology of 2017. My name is Aleka Thorvalson, and I am a holistic life coach and counseling astrologer, and I am super excited to be talking about this, mostly because it's interesting, and all of you have asked me this question repeatedly over the last few weeks. What is going on with 2017? The last couple of years have been rough, and now we're all pretty excited about the new year starting, and it seems like it's kind of started with a bang. And so when I am perplexed or confused or wanting more information, I like to turn to astrology. And so many of you, as my students and people that are also interested in astrology, do the same. So my intent here is to offer some of that understanding of the current cosmic weather. What's happening? How can we best utilize some of the changes that are clearly showing up for us this year? It was really helpful for me to actually go through all of the astrology that's coming up to have a better understanding about what's going on. And my intention today is you would feel the same way after this little webinar. I'm also practicing with this platform because I'm going to be doing more and more online stuff. All of you have asked for it. I have many clients all over the world. Hey. So I'm going to be doing more and more online seminars and groups and all this and classes and all the stuff that I do in person. I'm going to be extending them out. So I'm sort of playing with this new technology, which is really cool. And this particular webinar is just going to be me talking and showing some slides and things like that as we go. And then in the future, of course, I'm going to be doing webinars and things where you can actually have conversation and ask questions and participate as well. So because I have so much information, I just thought I would just get it out there and do it this way. And then I'll probably set up another talk in which you can all ask questions, either a Facebook Live or another webinar like this. And we can, if you have any questions, we can go over that. Okay, so as I said, the type of astrology I practice is a way of really understanding the what's happening, sort of the energetic weather that's showing up, with the intent of utilizing it to make change in our own lives. So I'm going to be talking about some of the bigger sort of meta patterns that are out there. But I want you to apply those bigger patterns and themes to your own personal life. There's so many themes that are so classically portrayed right now in our political climate and what's going on. I can't not talk about it because it's pretty evident. But again, take those bigger patterns and apply them to your life. I will be using some astrologies, we call it, which is the astrology language of planets and signs and houses and things like that, but not excessively. The way that I teach and how I utilize astrology isn't so technical. I'm a double Pisces, so I'll leave that to all the rest of you air signs to do it that way. No, but I will be talking about some of the aspects that are coming up in some of the signs. But if you don't know astrology, if you're new to astrology, if astrology is a language that is kind of foreign to you, don't worry about it. This webinar will still absolutely help you understand some of those deeper themes. You don't have to know the language. If you would like to know the language, then contact me. I will be having a class coming up online, as well as in person, to do that basics of astrology class. And many of you that are watching this right now have already done that. And so for you, I will be using some of the astrological language to help you get a sense of what it is I'm talking about. Yep. So, just listen wherever you are. This is super important. You'll get something good out of it. If you want to know how these cycles affect you personally, yeah, contact me. We can certainly look at these placements in your chart. I mean, that is important. Like, we are going to be talking about the meta patterns here, but where this all shows up in your personal chart does say a lot of how you personally are going to navigate the weather. So certainly feel free to contact me if you'd like. Okay, so the astrology of 2017. It is definitely a bit on the chaotic side. We will definitely say that. You don't need me to tell you that. If you're, at all attuned to what's happening in the world right now, you're feeling it. the first thing I want to say is don't panic. Take some deep breaths. We're all in this together, right? It's going to be okay, that kind of thing. I come from a background in depth psychology, which is this whole concept of going deep, going through the shadow to be able to heal and transform your life. It's sort of that hero's journey where you venture into the unseen parts of yourself, the parts that are a little scary or that you've hidden away from your consciousness. And in that shadowy place, you find some of your deepest treasure, some of your grace, some of your some of the sort of lost, buried parts of you. And then as you kind of ascend out of the underworld and back up, you bring wisdom, right? So from that perspective, what's good and what's bad and what's uncomfortable and those kinds of things, that it's seen as something that can actually be helpful and important, So I like to think about this time that we are in right now, and astrologically we're going to be talking about just how this is true, but that things aren't necessarily breaking down, but they are getting uncovered. And I think that there's a lot that's getting uncovered right now. Stuff that was always there, we just weren't as conscious of it, or maybe we were complacent, or we were sort of in our worlds going along and didn't see it. And such is the nature of shadow. No, we go on in our life and we don't recognize that there's actually anything wrong until there's a part of us that says, hey, check out this part that you didn't know was there. And so that's what's going on. And we'll be talking about just how that looks astrologically and how we're supposed to deal with it and what we're supposed to be doing with it in just a sec. But before we start, let's breathe, right? Take a deep breath and look and see what we need to do. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen with you because I have some slides to share. And again, this is new for me, so bear with me. Oh, I think it's working. You should be able to see me still there. But this is the astrology of 2017. All right, moving forward. The first thing that I want to say that I really recognized here for 2017 is that there's a lot going on, and most of it is in fire. So fire is our focus this year. There's plenty of fire elements that are showing up for us. There's plenty of aspects. There's plenty of energy that's going up. And just so you know, I'm going to be, as I always do, I'm going to be writing about some of these big things that I'm going to be talking about today. I'm going to be writing about them in my blog or doing a Facebook Live or doing more things like this. So a lot of this stuff I have written about already, or I will be writing about. But let's just focus on some of these major sort of meta themes. Fire. We have fire. What does that mean, right? Well, eclipses for the year are going to be primarily in Leo, which is a fire sign, and Aquarius, which is an air sign. So what happens when you get fire and air together? Whoosh, you get flame. So that's going to be important. Let me give you some of these dates for the people that are tracking that. We have two happening in February. Actually, today is the 10th, is the lunar eclipse at 22 degrees Leo, right? That's happening today. I wrote a blog post on it. If you'd like to read that, just go to my website. You can check it out. And then we're going to have on the 26th, a solar eclipse at 8 degrees Pisces. Now, this one is sort of the odd one. This particular eclipse is part of the last cycle that we're sort of finishing up. The eclipse on the 26th is the last eclipse of the Pisces cycle that was last year. Okay, so then we have two more in August. We have one on the 15th, which is a partial lunar eclipse in Aquarius. So we got the Aquarius piece. And then the big one is the total solar eclipse in August on the 21st. That's 28 degrees Leo. So again, Leo, Aquarius. Yeah. So these themes are going to be playing out for us this year. And that eclipse on the 21st at 28 degrees Leo, that's a big one. Though this is a major event. You might have even heard about it by now. It's sort of been traveling around Facebook. But this is an eclipse that's visible around the United States. It's actually going to go coast to coast, which will be pretty exciting. The last time that it did that, went from coast to coast, was in 1918. So it's been a while since it did that. It's going to be a prominent eclipse. So, I mean, it'll be cool to definitely see, but it also means that it's just prominent as far as the meaning in our lives. What are eclipses? Eclipses are energetic reboots. They're an opportunity for us to assess how we work with this fire energy, air and fire, you know, because they're going to be in this dichotomy the entire year. How we work with it, how we utilize it in our own lives and collectively. And again, a lot of this stuff depends on where it is in your chart, but think of them as energetic reboots. And again, I will say a little bit more on what the fire element means in our lives in just a second. I just want to give you sort of the main themes. Okay, the next main event that's sort of happening that really shows us this fire element is going to be Venus retrograde in March. Now, Venus goes retrograde March 6th at 13 degrees Aries, another fire sign, right? And it's going to go all the way till April 15th. It will end in Pisces, right? So what we have, all that fire energy taking a dip back into the water and then coming back again. If you know anything about the zodiac, we have the end, right, of Pisces is the last sign till we start again in Aries. So this is sort of the trend that we've also been hearing. If you study numerology, they talk about this being a 1 year. This is a time to start over, beginnings, that kind of thing. So we see that a bit here reflected in this retrograde for sure. And then we see fire again. Now, Venus retrogrades, you've probably heard, Mercury's going retrograde or something's happening in that regard. That's a really popular one. But Venus retrogrades are pretty rare. They only occur every year and a half or so. And Venus is only retrograde 7% of the time, which is less than any other planet. So when Venus goes retrograde, it's kind of a bigger deal for us. So what does that mean? We'll talk about the meaning of that in a minute. But any kind of retrograde energy, you're going to start feeling it about a month before, and which is called the setup phase. And then the retrograde period comes, and then about a month after, which we call the integration phase. So you should be feeling some of these themes now, and then we'll feel them a little bit more intensely in March, right? So because of the retrograde motion, Venus is going to stay in Aries a lot longer than it normally would. So that's another important piece around that. And I will be doing, I'm sure, either a webinar like this or a Facebook Live or a blog about it, because there'll be a lot of themes we want to dive into here for sure. But some of them, right, like I want you to think about it this way. Venus represents our force of connection, how we find love, our divine femininity. And it's in fiery Aries. And Aries is going to represent that warrior, pioneer energy. So we have this Venus warrior, kind of energy. We have this warrior sort of goddess emerging. And that's pretty indicative of some of the themes we've seen lately around the big the mass protests that have gotten together around, reclaiming that divine feminine. And that's going to be a pretty big theme for this year too, is what that means to be feminine in a pretty masculine culture. So this is really going to be an interesting dynamic as we go forward. We really are redefining feminism in our collective culture and masculinity or the patriarchy. And we see this with that Pluto in Capricorn. Pluto in Capricorn has been there for a while, will be there for a while. But this is really, Pluto is all about transformation. And Capricorn is our structure, our government, the way we run things. Certainly would represent our masculinity, right? Capricorn energy. So we are really redefining what it means to be feminine in our culture. And I think we're really seeing that. The other things that can show up are assessing where we need to assert and reclaim our divine feminine. We talked about that. the other piece, karma around love and relationships arise. What does this mean? Okay, this means, because any retrograde motion is sort of this energy of, it seems like the planet is going backwards. Obviously it's not, but it's just appears that way. So there's this energy of needing to go inward to assess. Sometimes things that are below will rise to the surface. So some relationship issues, if there are any in the relationships you're in, will start to come up. Right? It'll just become obvious in your life. And then you have a choice about what you're going to do with it. It's not necessarily a good or bad time. It's just an interesting time. And where it shows up in your chart and how prominent it is, these are all super important as far as, what that looks like. Okay, so relationship stuff, that's going to be an issue. I think we're seeing a lot of that right now. Coming up as far as how we treat one another. I have seen so many interesting patterns arise around what's happening collectively and what that means to our personal relationships. I have seen some actual separation of families and things like that over these kinds of issues. And whether that's good or bad, it's important, because I think we are being called to take a stand in some way. And we'll talk about that when we talk more about the fire energy. And that brings us to the sort of Venus retro theme of fierce love and what that looks like. So Venus as a whole tends to be pretty diplomatic and soft and, finding both sides and finding that sense of balance. But it's in Aries, so it definitely adds a fierceness to it. And I think that it's about real love when I say that. And so often when we say love, we think of squishy, sort of rolling over and just acquiescing and being compassionate. And sure, love does look like that sometimes. It's sort of, unconditional acceptance of everything. But fierce love, Venus and Aries love, is pretty different. It's that level of love where we set boundaries. It's the love that inspires us to take a stand. It's the love that says no more. I mean, I think that there is something incredibly loving about setting a boundary for yourself and for the other person. Right? So it's about connecting to that part of us that says, no, that's not loving. We are being asked to assess how we see love. And that is our personal love, our love of the environment, our love to fellow man, our love to the global consciousness, which we'll be talking about in a little bit. So all the aspects of what do we truly stand for? What do we value? What does love mean? We are really at a choice point here between love and fear. And love is sometimes fierce, right? Because it takes that stand. So that's something to think about. Again, macro level, take that into your own world and figure out, where do I, what keeps me from real love and connection? Where do I edit myself or habitually hustle for connection? And where do I need to set those boundaries with yourself, self-love, with other people? So this theme is going to be super important as we move forward into this year. And as I said, we should be feeling it about now. I certainly have. I've been setting lots of boundaries. One of the boundaries I just set yesterday was going through my Facebook feed and erasing, because you know what? It's not loving for me to look at my feed and see stuff that I don't connect with and I don't need in my consciousness at this point. I got plenty of that elsewhere, right? So where are some acts of self-love that you can approach to hold that energy of love in your life? What do you need to let go of? What do you need to, and that's that Aries and Pisces place, right? That beginning and ending. What needs to be let go of so you can really side with love? Okay, I think I've said enough about that. So again, I'll be talking more about that, but that's a big deal. And then we're going to move into more aspects of more fire. Okay, Saturn and Sagittarius, that's a big deal. Sagittarius is a fire sign. I did a blog post on it a while back. Definitely one you want to check out. This is going on for a while. And it's really about redefining our belief system personally and collectively. We're being asked to kind of get real about what we stand for. and what we say and what we do. You know, it's like, yeah, okay, so you say that you're for the environment, or you say you're for equal rights, and you say you're for the economy, or you say this. Now, what are you going to actually do about it? What does that really mean? Sort of like putting our money where our mouth is kind of thing. You know, it's like, what do you really value? And that's Saturn and Sagittarius. It's really a getting real with ourselves. The other piece about Saturn and Sag I think that's important is to sometimes we have to work at faith. And this is one of those years that we have to work at faith. It's so easy to get overwhelmed right now with everything that's going on. It's hard. I mean, I've struggled with it myself. There's some days where I just wake up and I'm like, what is the next thing that's going to happen? And in those moments, it's hard to remember that sort of detachment or that universal perspective that we can have, where sometimes when bad things happen, bad in quotes, doesn't mean that it's actually bad. You know, it's uncomfortable, it's challenging, but you know, maybe it's okay. Maybe there's yet to be determined where this is all going to end up. That shouldn't make us complacent, but it should help us to find that sense of faith. And so Saturn and Sagittarius is like, sometimes you got to work at it. And I think that takes a practice, that sometimes takes some discipline, that sometimes takes some ritual to be able to really work at what does faith mean to you. I mean, certainly faith right now is a big deal. I mean, there are major meta themes that are showing up about faith. And the shadow of Sagittarius, of course, is dogmatic religion or dogmatic belief systems that don't have any leeway. You know, it's the difference, say, between being skeptical and being cynical. You know, skepticism is great. You know, you're kind of gathering more data and learning more information. Cynicism is a closed system. There's no information that's getting in. So it's not helpful. And that's sort of the shadow of Saturn and Sagittarius, of dogma. And we see some of that. You know, we see some of that cognitive dissonance that's happening. It's like, I have to stay in alignment with what I chose because I have no idea what that looks like otherwise. So that's all happening. So more fire. Other things that are showing up, Mercury in retrograde, they're all moving to fire this year. So that's kind of interesting. We have dates for all of you people that are doing the astrology thing. December 19th to 2016 to January 8th, 2017. We already went through that. Check my blog on that. We have an earth sign Capricorn to fire sign Sag. Okay, so we have Mercury going retrograde there. April 9th to May 3rd, 2017, we have earth sign Taurus to fire sign Aries. August 12th, September 5th, 2017, from earth Virgo, ends in fire Leo. December 3rd to December 22nd, we have it all in Sagittarius. So those are the Mercury retrograde dates. And that's fire, more fire. And then I thought it was interesting. I'm not a huge, I don't know a whole ton about, you know, Chinese astrology, but the Chinese New Year is the fire rooster, which I was like, oh, really? More fire? So more fire. Okay. So what does that all mean? What does fire mean? Well, think about it from an elemental perspective. Fire makes light, right? So illumination, seeing what is normally unseen, shining a light in the darkness. You get the picture, right? We get illumination. So that's what's certainly happening. Things are being uncovered, right? Things are lighting up. We are noticing some stuff that we didn't notice before. So we have that. What else? Gift of anger. That's a huge one. And that kind of goes with that fierce Venusian, fierce love I was talking about. So many of us don't own our anger. We are conditioned in our culture somewhat, especially as a woman, I can say that, to, you know, not to be angry. But anger is such an important force within us. And I think most of the time we're conditioned out of it because we're taught about anger from people that also don't know anger very well, or we get really, you know, if anger is a app we're downloading, that app gets corrupted because what we're seeing out there is so very different, or so dysfunctional. It's like a corrupted app. So then we get that, and our anger either looks maybe aggressive or passive aggressive because it doesn't have a clear channel to run through. We don't know what to do with it. So we just sort of hold it down or try to manipulate with it or get our needs met, in another way. And anger doesn't come out clearly. So the gift of anger, of course, if we think about it, is clarity, right? The gift of anger is that warrior goddess that stands up within us, or God, that says, no. The gift of anger says, I need to set a boundary. I need to enforce a boundary. Or there's an inner boundary within myself that I need to attend to. So those are some areas that we can really stop and say, okay, if we feel angry right now, and you're going to feel angry, if you haven't yet, stick around. If we're using our anger from a clear channel, we're going to say, okay, where's the limit here? What's the boundary? What's happening? Is this information that I need to look at myself? I've been hearing that a lot, right? That spiritual sort of belief that every time we're triggered, there's information for us, so it's more of an internal event. And I love that. I mean, I agree. I think there's a huge amount of truth to that. But in a fire year, there actually is sort of this line in the sand element that we need to draw. So yes, definitely, you feel angry, look inward and say, okay, what's my stuff? And then, there's going to be some stuff that's yours, but there's also going to be some stuff that you actually can take a step into and say, no, this is not okay. I've done all my work and this still isn't okay. So there's that piece that we really want to hold on to. Anger is the source of passion. It's the source of purpose. If people come into my office, which this is a common one actually, and they're feeling purposeless, I don't know why I'm here, we'll talk about anger and we'll say, all right, so how are you with your anger, right? Because anger is that part of us that gets fired up, that says, I got to go do something. I got to say this thing. So if you think about anyone that's ever changed history, the one thing they had in common is they were pissed. So there's a lot of pissed right now, and that's good. There's a lot of dysfunctional anger, and we're going to be seeing that too. We're going to talk about the shadow here too, and that's not as helpful. So this is a great opportunity for us to own assertion. If passive aggressive is over here, it's sort of a dysfunctional display of anger. And then we have aggressive anger over here, which is another way of trying to make a change without letting any other information in. It's just a one-sided control or tyranny way. In the middle, we have assertion, right? So assertion is us grounded in our truth. We've done some work around our anger. We're making sure that it's now, and we're saying, you know what? No. I am not going to enable this anymore. I can't stand down anymore. I have to take a stand. And I am in my truth. So the two parts to assertion: speaking your truth from your grounded sense of self, and letting go of the other person's need to like it. Not everybody is going to like what you say, and that's okay. That doesn't mean it's a horrible thing, right? They have a right to their opinions as long as they're in their truth, and you have a right to yours. And when we're both in that space, conflict becomes an amazing force of change. It's like the alchemy to the lead, changing it to gold. You can understand, I can understand, we're having this discussion, right? If we're both in that place. And what's interesting about that kind of discussion is you're going to realize that both of you are probably on the same side. You just are finding different ways of getting there. Okay, so the gift of anger, utilizing that, honing it in with in your own psyche and in your own self. Thinking of times in your life this year where you need to take a stand, you're probably going to need to. And making sure that you're coming from that place of assertion and not aggression or passive aggression. Okay. Bold initiator, certainly fire is the courage to speak up, the courage to speak out. I think we're seeing a lot of that right now, right? We're really being tested. That energy that we all have, let's keep it going. And that brings us to infectious. Fire is interesting, right? Because if I have fire on a stick and you have a stick and I hold my fire to your stick, it catches. And then if you do it and someone else does it, everybody's fire gets lit. So there's this infectious sort of movement energy that we see with fire. That's good and not good, depending on, the intent of that. And I mean good in that sense of, is it connected to truth or fear? So, but we have seen that. We have seen the rise of movement with this energy. And I don't suppose it's going to die down anytime soon. Anger can be intense, it can be dramatic, and it can be unpredictable. And that's important. I would expect, and I don't do a lot of predictory stuff, but I would expect, looking at this year, we can expect the unexpected. Sudden change and surprise are probably going to be pretty evident, so stay on your toes. Right? Just be prepared for stuff to kind of, every day it's something new, it seems. And I don't think that's going to necessarily change. I think things are going to continue to come out of left field. And that's the nature of fire. Okay. Clears out the dead wood. This is important too. Fire is this element, if you think about it from a natural perspective, is it if say there's a forest fire and we allow that fire to destroy everything. And it does. It destroys a lot of the things that are still alive, some of the trees and some of the wildlife and things like that. But in a way, nature needs that. It needs that clearing out of the dead wood and the dead trees so it can make room for new growth. That is basically the metaphor for this year. We are clearing out so much of the dead wood of our collective consciousness, of our personal consciousness. What isn't working. This is fire. Fire is like, let's get rid of it. And that's what's happening. And the other piece to remember is it won't last forever. So, remember that fire will burn out, and it will. Things change in the next couple of years after this one. We won't even go there yet. Just know that they will. Things do start to mellow out a bit, but the fire right now is important. And I know it can easily get you exhausted, but just sometimes it's helpful to remember that I don't have to keep up this pace forever. So important stuff. Okay. So let's look at the shadow of fire. Now I kind of mentioned this a second ago. Everything in astrology, just like everything in life, has a shadow and a light. Right? It's either done from a place of fear or it's done from a place of love. And depending on that energy gets channeled in a specific way. It's either building up, integrating, it's it's breaking down. This is sort of that, just the truth that goes much deeper than astrology. That's sort of a life truth. So the shadow of fire, how do we know we're in the shadow of fire? How do we know when we see it? At best, the shadow of fire is the need for validation, the reliance on accolades, the doing things for a reward and being noticed. Think about it from that perspective. It's usually connected to ego or fear or insecurity, needing to kind of be better than we feel we are, that kind of thing. At worst, we can fall into narcissism, tyranny, dictatorship, control, dominance, aggression, and even violence. And interestingly enough, we have seen some of this. We have seen some of this extreme narcissism and tyranny and dominance, which is just fascinating when you look at this astrologically, where this is showing up. So awesome. We can look at that from a meta perspective. Look at that inward for yourself. Where do you hustle? Where are you controlling? Where do you fall sometimes in the need for validation or wanting that external reward? Where do you need validation? I call it having a reflected sense of self, right? So your sense of self is only evident to you when it's reflected back at you in some way. And that's the shadow of fire. So really important to look at yourself in your relationships in this way. Okay, what's the light? This would be connected to the heart. Fire signs are all about the heart, especially Leo, which is where we are today with this full moon. So when you're connected to your heart, you have a grounded sense of self. You don't need that reflected sense of self, right? That light coming from within you is not coming from outside in, it's coming from the inside out. So when you feel that way, the light of fire is you feel inspired, you feel purposeful, you feel creative, right? I just got to do this. It's taking over. You feel authentic. It's an authentic expression of yourself. You feel like you can set boundaries, right? Because there is that, this is where I am, that's where you are, right? There's a sense of passion, pure anger. So anger does arise, right? But that's not That's not a bad thing. Remember, no feelings are bad. It's just how we use them. So you do have this sort of like this energy that rises up in you. Joy, that's an expression of fire as well, feeling incredibly joyful, and then courageous, right? So these are all the elements of we really want to be developing this year, developing these things in our lives. Okay, connected to the heart. And you might see both sides this year, quite frankly, a little bit of this, some of that. This is whenever we're asked to work with a theme, it's so common to kind of feel ourselves going to either side. And then that's how we learn, right? That's how we learn. So, okay. So how to best use fire? As I said, tap into your passion. What are you passionate about? I think there's a lot of people passionate right now about certain things, whether that's something creatively in your life that you're like, I got to do this. You know what? Life is short. I got to do this thing that I know I'm connected to in my heart. My heart has been calling me to do this thing. Great. Use your anger as a force of creation rather than destruction. Don't engage in arguments to be right. Understand, use conscious conflict, the gifts of anger, as we talked about, inspire other people. This is great. Light that fire to other people. And one of the things about fire that's super important is it does rule creativity and art and how we express ourselves. And I think that's how we inspire other people. So maybe you're inspiring other people. It doesn't mean that you're standing on a soapbox. Maybe you decided to create this amazing art or take a class in art that you've never done before. And that is the inspiration that you pass on to other people. You pass on your fire that way. So a great time to get creative. Creativity looks different for everybody. That would be another great thing that we can look at in your chart to see what that creative spark looks like for you. This is a great time to get moving, either physically. This is going to be a year that we're going to feel a lot of energy. So sometimes getting exercise can be really helpful to kind of either work through that, balance some of it, just get it out. I've already been feeling that. This sort of energy of like, I need to move more than I normally do. And I normally do move a lot. But not only, getting some exercise and getting out there, but getting out there and getting your voice heard, being noticed. So speaking, acting, doing, what do you need to do? We've really been seeing that collectively because my gosh, every day I get another either email or Facebook post on, hey, write this letter, do this thing, find this truth, whatever it is. It's about, this is not a Pisces year. This is not a year where we are like sitting on a mountaintop, doing some internal work and really willing things to change. This is a year that we're being asked to get out there and do the change, be the change, right? Pick a side. This is tough. And we're going to be talking about where this really shows up in the next piece, but you're going to probably be called to pick a side. That doesn't mean we have to be righteous in our anger or on the passive aggressive or aggressive side, but it does mean that you're probably going to have a truth. It's okay to have that truth. There's a huge difference between being judgmental and being discerning. Huge. And you can be discerning. There's nothing unspiritual about saying, this is aligning with my truth. This is just what I feel in my, and we're going to be talking about this too, universal truth, not necessarily dogmatic, fear-based truth. There's a big difference between the two. And I'll get to that one in a minute. So I'm going to kind of put a pin in that one, and then we'll discuss that in a sec. We're going to want to balance the energy. So all this fire energy, take the time to, get grounded, take some time to be silent. We're going to really want to kind of, it's so funny. Facebook is coming up a lot today as I'm talking, but that's how we connect so much these days, I suppose. I've seen so many people just like, I'm taking a Facebook hiatus for a little bit, a little break from all of this energy. And that might be really needed, but making sure that you're getting the other elements in there too, right? So get to the beach, go for a walk, go to the woods, get quiet, balance some of this fire. Because it's probably going to feel pretty intense. Sleep well, stress reduce, techniques that you might have, eat well, get exercise as needed, that sort of thing. Help out your adrenals a little bit. All right. So let's move forward. Okay. That's some of that. Other heavy hitters. What are some other main themes that we're seeing this year? Well, the last few years, if any of you are in astrology and in the know, you know about those T-squares and grand crosses that we've been sort of dealing with. Well, this is the last of it this year. Yay. No, but we're in the integration phase. And I've heard different astrologers talk about that, but many say that the integration phase is the most difficult in some ways, because it's like we've been given this information and this change has happened, and now we're trying to kind of integrate it into our own lives, you know? So there's a personal aspect to this that can be challenging. But the T-squares are definitely still in effect. And I want to show you another slide that might help you if you don't know what a T-square is, because some people are like, I don't know what the T-square is. Let's see. Here it is. We'll just look at my chart. So this is actually my solar return chart, which I don't care if you look at it. But this is a T-square. It goes from here to here to here. You see where we have this is an opposition, right? So it's about 180 degrees. It's opposite. This would be like 90, right? And this is 90. So that's a T-square. And that's been happening. We have the opposition between Jupiter and Libra. That's what that says. And then we have this Uranus and Aries. Aries is a fire sign. Just FYI. And then we have this Pluto. So these three planets have sort of been dancing, and other planets have joined the party, and they've done all kinds of conversations and things. But this Pluto here, Jupiter, Uranus, that's still showing up. So that's what a T-square looks like, just so you know. Oh, oops. Okay. So we have that going on. That's still happening. Finishing up. This is a collective sort of nervous breakthrough, right? We don't want to call it necessarily a breakdown. I like to call them breakthroughs instead, but it kind of feels that way. Like W2F is happening right now. Everything feels like it's going crazy. This is sort of this energy that we're experiencing. Jupiter is retrograde in Libra. I wrote a big blog post about that. That's important. And it also dances with opposition to Uranus and Aries, which I just showed you, remember? And squares Pluto in Capricorn. So Jupiter is going to become a major player this year, which is interesting because anything Jupiter touches, it expands. And I think that one thing we can all agree on is things are like way expansive. Things have gotten much bigger. Okay, so we have Jupiter and Libra opposing Uranus and Aries. Remember I showed you that opposition, that 180 degrees? What does that mean? Okay, so Jupiter and Libra is the sign of the scales. It's very diplomatic. It's like, can't we all get along? And Jupiter's like, yeah, can't we all get along? You know? And then Uranus and Aries is like, nope, no, we can't. This is the warrior, the part of us that's the inner rebel, Uranus, in the sign of, the warrior or Aries, fire. So it's sort of like the rebel and the diplomat, are having a discussion. Now, the thing about oppositions you want to recognize is they both have something in common, even though they're opposites. They both have a like-minded goal, but they might have opposite ways of getting there. So you want to look for the commonalities between the two. This is a good thing to do when we're discussing things with people. But really, we're looking at the middle ground and extremes, like keeping the peace, keeping things copacetic, keeping things familiar and regular, and then, stepping out of the box completely and saying we need to do something radically different. And I think that that's true. I mean, one of the things that I've done over the course of the last couple weeks, really, because if I don't understand something, I will often make a point to really listen to the opposition. I really, truly want to know how it makes sense to somebody. I may not have that truth within me, but I am very interested in understanding how that is true for you and where that's coming from. And what I have recognized, so what did that look like? Well, I listened to because you all know my political standpoint. And I'm not actually very political at all. If you all know me, I don't. I'm not political, but I do side on sort of those main themes of love and universal truth and decency and things like that. So I'm not political. I'm really not any political party. I would be probably an independent if you asked me. So I think that it's important to recognize that this is so not about politics anymore. But what I did over the last couple of weeks is I really listened to sort of this right-wing conservative radio to really get an understanding of, and shows and things like that, which I never listen to. I don't listen to either side, quite frankly. So it's not like I listen to pro or the liberal side either. I don't. But I made a point to do that. And what I found was that at the core, everybody is really wanting radical change. Both sides are wanting change. We have that in common. It's just how we get there. That's the important piece. And so this is important with this Jupiter and Libra opposite Uranus and Aries, because change implies that we do something different than we've done. And I think that what we're seeing right now collectively, and I want you to take this internally too, is that we are at a choice point here as far as how we're going to move forward. And if we want change, are we going to apply the same things that we've always done to try and get a different result, which obviously is sort of insane, right? That's the definition of insanity. Or are we going to try something radically different to get to get a change that we've never experienced before? And I do believe that all of this stuff this year, astrologically, is really asking us to do that. And we're going to need that Uranus and Aries, that deep, rebellious part of us that says, totally radical, do something out of the box, and you need to take a risk. And then we need that Jupiter and Libra saying, okay, yeah, what does that actually mean, in the real world, and how do we actually do it? So these are some of the themes that are really showing up. Cooperation, rebellion. I mean, that's certainly showing up. How do we find that middle ground? That's super important. Let's see what else we got here. We have, it's not about, whenever we get Uranus involved, and Jupiter, quite frankly, and Libra, we sort of have this concept of, it's not about my way. Uranus and Libra and Jupiter are sort of this expansive of knowing, of not focusing so much on the self, but what is universally right, universally true. So it's not about my way or the highway, but what is the best way? What is the most effective way? Not for maybe personal truths, but collective truths. What's the best way? Jupiter also rules legal matters, which is sort of interesting considering what we have now seen collectively. And so this is human law versus this concept of universal law. So universal law is the spirit of the law, not just the letter of the law, like what's really right. And not from a legal standpoint, even necessarily, but from a human standpoint. And this is, universal law would be taking all of the main spiritual traditions that are out there and kind of, where are they all finding commonality? Stuff like do unto others as you want others to do unto you, be the change, cause and effect, karma. And these are, most major traditions have this sort of understanding, like what it means to be a person that's sourced in truth and love versus someone who's sourced in fear and control and doing it for me. It's this concept of being able to really look at the bigger picture and saying, how are you like me and how am I like you? Being able to put ourselves in the other person's place. So this is sort of that concept of universal law. I think from a universal perspective, if we can get someone in a room and ask them, what do you know to be true? Like really? Like truly, from a human perspective, from a deep truth perspective, I think 99.9% of the people are going to say, well, this is probably right. I think when we get into collective masses and on social media, that gets really warped because we know that about truth. It can get distorted when you add a lot of people to it. You get a lot of force, and then you get people do very different things when they're a part of a group or they're hiding behind a computer than they would if they're one-on-one. But this universal law, I think we all know what that is. And this is a deep theme that's coming up right now. Besides that, we want to look at the universal law for, globally. Like, we are a global nation. That is not a selective fact. That is a truth. We are part of a whole. Uranus, by the way, in Aries, we are part of a whole. We can't negate that fact as much as we want to deny that that is a truth. That is a technical truth. That is true. So that works into universal law too. But we also have the consciousness of the spirit of the law within the framework of our small United States. Within that, right? There are certain ideals and traditions and beliefs that have been written in, and they're more about, and they're reflected in the actual law, but they're also the spirit of the law. There's a spirit of truth with a capital T that permeates our culture. So these are themes that are going to show up. And I think they're already starting to show up about what do we truly believe. So I am very interested to see where this goes on. I don't presume that these court cases and the Supreme Court and the ACLU and all the stuff that's happening, that's going to stop anytime soon. I think there'll be continual testing of this. And then how do you take that into your own life? Where do you violate universal law? Where do you need to be the change, and human law? So these are great tools, or they're great tips to kind of reflect on in your own process. Things will probably occur suddenly. This is that Uranus and Aries piece again, that maybe a little bit out of left field. Now, the reason why we're meant to have this part of us, it's like, oh, can't we all just get along? But no, we can't, because now this other crazy thing just happened. That the intent of that is to bring the energy so we can say, okay, now what are we going to do about it? Those are all choice points for us. And that's what these oppositions really provide us, is this sort of wake-up call, right? So that's what these are all for. Jupiter and Uranus is definitely, this dance is a lot about social change. So these are a series of wake-up calls and opportunities to choose change. I mean, think of all of these moments that we have already to choose change. And we continually are being tested in doing that. Injustices will be revealed. This is that, the elements of human law, the elements of universal law. It will continue to arise, so we can decide what we're going to do with that and how we're going to choose change, or are we going to apply the same principles, right? So this is that dynamic. These are those choice points. I think over the last few years, at least personally, that there's sort of been a desensitization to what's really happening, to the bigger picture in all of it. This is the wake-up call. I mean, this year is a huge wake-up call already. And we're just in February, right? So this is a wake-up call to see, whoa, what's really happening? You've been desensitized. Now you can't be anymore. Big deal. Jupiter is very idealistic. Ideals, philosophy, beliefs. How do we deal with that? These are all being challenged. I think it's so fascinating with this that we're seeing this really rise in the white supremacy movement. I think they're called National Socialists. I might be wrong about that, but they call themselves different things. And it's been really interesting to watch that sort of movement sort of show up, which is a very interesting Jupiter, Libra, Uranus, Aries type of thing. Certainly human law and universal law come up, and not just that side of things. And we can take anything. I just watched some amazing documentaries on that, and racism and prejudice and misogyny and all of that. I mean, these are the things that are arising. So why are they arising? For us to be able to do something with them, right? These things have always been there. We just didn't notice them. So it's stopping that desensitization. As much as people are at arms about the political climate and who got to be voted in to be president, there's a huge part of me that wonders if we wouldn't be having, we wouldn't be having this conversation if it went a different way. Perhaps it all started with, the change that we needed was way, way back, when the two candidates were being put up and chosen. I don't know, but I think it's fascinating to think about that right now we are having conversations that we have probably needed to have And I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing. You know, maybe there's something working that we don't know is working, and it's working in our favor. And that way it's allowing us the opportunity to choose. Okay, so some hope, right, as we move forward. Some Jupiter in Libra for you. Okay, so that's Jupiter in Libra. Let's talk about Jupiter in Libra now. Remember, it was opposition, right? Now we're going to talk about that square. So we have that square to Pluto and Capricorn. Whew, yeah, Pluto and Capricorn. You know, Pluto is sort of the point within us, the points in our lives when we get breakdown via, or breakthrough via breakdown. That should be different in that chart, or that slide should be different. Breakthrough via break. Yeah, via breakdown. So correct that. That's a little interesting Freudian slip, I suppose. Okay, let's see. Creatively destructive. Yes, that is exactly what I'm saying. We break it down, remember that dead wood, so we can grow it back. Super important. March 30th in 2017 and August 4th, 2017, this square goes direct. Oh, and let me give you the dates for the opposition. I'm sorry, I didn't do that. Let me do that. Okay, so for this opposition, backwards, we're going backwards a little bit, we're retrograding. It's going to be direct here, Jupiter in Libra, opposite Uranus in Aries. This one is going to be direct March 3rd and September 28th, give or take. And the next one, I gave you the dates, March 30th, 2017, August 4th, 2017. Okay, this is a breakthrough in civility. You know, sometimes we just need to get real. Certainly anytime Pluto is involved in anything, we get the shadow emerging. Shadow truths, Jupiter represents truth about our ideals, our laws, our relationships, and we see the role of structure in our lives. You know, so what does structure mean? And what does that look like? What do you really stand for? I mean, these are important truths here. Our shadows rise to the surface. Again, I think that we have seen so much of this lately, of having to kind of look at what needs to be broken down so we can get breakthroughs. Okay, so this is calling out unethical behavior. It's calling out anything that's not alignment with our truth. Certainly our shadow is showing up everywhere. And the intent of seeing the shadow, of course, is to do it differently. Now, you know, anytime, if you think about this collectively, your shadow is coming up personally in your life, no doubt about that. You know, there's a lot of fear floating around, and that square definitely shows fear. Right? So what are we going to do with that? Are we going to choose fear, or are we going to side with love? And that's an important piece. But your fear is surely coming up. And this is an opportunity for you to really, that Jupiter in Libra is saying, choose faith. What if fear is only just a thing, right? False evidence appearing real. Maybe there's nothing to be afraid of. Maybe this is all in our head. Maybe if we have faith, and we align with our truth, and we stand up for what we believe in, and we set those boundaries, maybe at the end of the year, we're going to have a much different experience with this. So I will say this on that note, however, you know, whenever I do work with people on shadow and I do my own shadow work, we always have a choice, right? We always have a choice of whether we're going to do the work, and we're going to really shift, and we're going to use that shadow energy as an opportunity to change. Or we're going to just we're going to be like, oh, I see that's there, but I'm going to leave that there, and I'm going to go do my own thing over here, the same thing I've always done. You know, that is our choice. And Pluto is a get real planet, man. I mean, it is like, look, you're going to get it, or it's going to come back harder. What are you going to figure out? What are you going to do? You know, so there's a certain reality here that we are at a choice point. You know, it's a little bit tenuous about what choice we're going to pick. So what I would say is, you just do you. You find your own integrity. You look at your own shadow, and you come to your own integration, and then move forward from that place. So there's probably some shadow stuff showing up, you know, for you here. I know my shadow's showing up. I tell you. All right. So now let's talk about the empty leg. And you're like, the what? Yeah. Okay, the empty leg. Okay, so let me go to the T-square again. So one of the things that's important to recognize about a T-square, this right here, is that the opposition point, this right here, is known as the empty leg. You see how there's energy here, there's energy here, there's energy here, there's energy here. But what's missing is here. Because if it was here, then you'd get this little piece, right? If something was here, you get this balance. Well, that's called the empty leg. So whenever you're working with a T-square like that, you want to go to the empty leg to find the remedy, right? To find the energy that you need to use to balance all the tension of that square. And in your own chart, you'll want to look at all this stuff, of course. You also want to look at your own chart to the moon. That'll tell you a lot because it's the empty leg is in Cancer, and the Cancer is ruled by the moon. So you want to look and see what that's doing, you know, where that is, to kind of give you a little more information on that. But you're going to want to work on Cancerian themes. And I've been saying this from day one. I've been saying this for a while, but I think it's so important we say it now. We need to develop Cancerian themes to help us with all this. So what does Cancer mean? What is the universe telling us about the energy? Well, nurturing, empathy, compassion, softness, empathy. I'll say it again. So important, you know, because we need to have understandings. What I have seen so much, which is tough on me, the sensitive Pisces that I am, is how little empathy there is, and how mean, you know, that I've seen, the arguments get, and a lack of empathy. I think empathy is going to be the thing that's going to help us the most right now. So that's hugely important. Now, what does that mean? That means for you, you know, being empathetic to yourself as well, not just other people, but what is it that you need? You know, maybe you do need a break from this. Maybe you do need to go for that long walk. Empathy is the ability to look at ourselves and saying, how do I need to be nurtured through this change? What does that mean? Certainly self-compassion, self-understanding, self-nurturing, all that fire, and Cancer is a water sign, right? So all of that fire needs like, whew, let's throw some water on that fire. It's getting a little hot. You know what I mean? Find that balance. So I think this is super important, and this is a reason why this is showing up in the way that it is. Right? So it's to remember the Cancerian things. Now, so that self-love and all the softness, and this is like the archetypal mother, right? Like, oh, I got you, you know, I got you, boo, you're good. You know, I'm not going to let you go. I'm here for you. I got this sort of oneness. Empathy is the ability to put ourselves in other people's positions. Like, oh, if I was there, I understand, you know, like we start talking about the immigration, put yourself in their position. Both sides. I mean, how are we going to figure it out any other way? You know, probably something needs to get talked about. We need to have a conversation, but can we do it with empathy? You know, of understanding and trying to find that middle road that we've been talking about. So yes, we can, but that's what's not happening, you know? So we need more empathy. Where can you find that in your life? You know, how can you be more empathetic? Find the commonality. We have to develop this, you know, that the missing leg of the T-square is not something that's necessarily easy. It's something that sometimes we have to like, whew, I got all this energy, kind of gravity pulling me here. I got to actually like consciously work on this other part. So that's something important. And I always find this interesting because Cancer is ruled by the crab, which out of all sort of rulerships, that's just sort of weird because it's the squishy sort of like mothering, you know, nurturing sign, and like the crab, you know, not so much. It's sort of like should be ruled by like puppies or something, but crab it is. And I never got it until one of my teachers would say, well, the reason why, you know, it's ruled by the crab from a symbolic perspective is the inside of a crab is super soft. The outside is the exoskeleton, right? Is what keeps a crab a crab. Without that, they're just soft. They don't even have any self. So this is the Cancerian part of us is not, I'm just a pushover. You know, that would be the shadow of Cancer, of just, yeah, whatever, you know, whatever you want. Okay. You know, I guess love is just whatever. That's not true. So a crab has those boundaries. So this is also about having boundaries, but boundaries about nurturing, boundaries about empathy. You know what? We are going to stay empathetic, boundaries about universal truth, all that stuff we're talking about. This empty leg is really here to develop it. So boundaries don't, love doesn't mean not having boundaries, is what I'm saying. Boundaries create the sacred space for us to really develop love in a sacred, universal way. Okay. The other piece that's super important about Cancer is the past. Cancer is the archetypal mother. It's also that femininity in the chart too, a little bit different than Venus, but it is that mother, and it's, the part that we're not actually owning. So that femininity is something that needs to come into this, which we just talked about with all that kind of fire masculine energy. Let's bring in some like feminine, stop. Can we all just talk kind of energy? Super important. But it also represents our past lives, our ancestors, what we're bringing forth from the past to the present. So past lives, super important, because we need to be able to look at the past to know what didn't work so we can move forward in new ways that do. And so I think this empty leg is really being gifted to us because we are meant to look back to be able to look forward. I think we should be doing that. I think this is what this is saying. So we need to do that. It also could be where some of your past stuff is arising, right? Like sometimes we need to look at the past in our own life. All this shadow stuff emerges and we're like, what is going on? Where's this coming from? And we might have to go past, go to the past to be able to go forward. So this could absolutely be showing up for you. Lastly, feelings. Cancer is the sign of feelings, so you're going to be having a lot of feelings. Have your feelings. I think what's missing is feelings to all of this. And so allow yourself to have your feelings. Use your feelings. I've done a podcast on it. It's free. You can go listen to that on my website, the Holistic Health Hour, on a whole hour and a half on the gift of feelings and how every feeling has energy, gives us the energy. Anger is like, I got this. I'm big. I'm energized. I'm going to take that stand I meant to take, right? Which is the energy and the wisdom of that feeling. But every feeling has wisdom, and there's a lot of feelings floating around. I mean, if you're sensitive in any way, you're feeling it. So feel your feelings and use them. The shadow of that, of course, would be to just get overwhelmed with them. Like, I'm not leaving my house. You know what I'm saying? And I felt that way sometimes, but we need to keep one foot in the river of feelings and then one foot on the ground. So we're able to kind of stay grounded, but have our feelings. I would imagine that bringing feeling to our lives would be important. Yeah? Okay. So that's majority of what's going on. As I said, all of those cycles could be looked at much deeper. I could do probably 2 or 3 hours. I could do a whole weekend on each one of those. But I'm really just trying to give you an overview to help you understand what's happening, right? So I have a few quotes to sort of close with here. And really they reflect that empathy that I was talking about, that Cancerian empty leg. So I love this one. Instead of putting others in their place, put yourself in their place. Oh boy, could so many of our problems be solved if we could just remember or put ourselves in the other person's shoes for 5 minutes. Here's a couple more. If you are arguing against empathy, no matter the context, you are on the wrong side. I think that's true, and I really think that we're meant to have all of this conflict as a way to better understand. I love this one. I actually found this. Barack Obama said that, interestingly enough, but it's a great quote on empathy. It's the lack of empathy that makes it very easy for us to plunge into wars. It's the lack of empathy that allows us to ignore the homeless on the streets. I think that's true. I think these are wake-up calls. This whole year is a wake-up call for us to really connect back to our empathy. What is it like to be that person? No matter what side of the fence you're on, try to understand the other side and learn from that. It doesn't mean you go, oh yeah, that's them, and I guess that's fine. No, not necessarily, but try to find the commonality. And then lastly, I will close with this this quote, which is sort of my mantra of the year. Sometimes things fall apart so that better things can fall together. More and more, I'm seeing that. There's been some amazing shifts that have already happened. People are activated that haven't been before. I think there's movements, there's excitement, there's passion, there's all this fire moving around. Let's just give it a beat to figure out. That doesn't mean stop. That means keep going, right, with where we're going. But rather than decide that this year sucks already and it's only February and where's our world going and, you know, everything is so terrible, give it a second to kind of fall apart. I've watched this, you know, the transformation cycle, the shadow journey so many times. And what I will hear is that people often say this, you know, boy, that cancer was the best thing that ever happened to me. You know, that relationship falling apart, man, best thing to happen to me. I say it, the financial crash where I lost literally everything, best thing that happened to me. Certainly some of the worst things in my life that have happened to me. You know, my past wasn't all that great in many, many ways. And it enabled me to be who I am right now. Without that wisdom, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing in the way that I do it, you know? So I think that there's an opportunity for us to just, for a moment, do our own shadow work, do our collective shadow work, keep fighting for that universal truth and what we know is right. Keep setting those boundaries, keep the fire burning, but, you know, kind of stay in that place of hope and faith. That's that work that we're meant to do. So questions, if you have them, you can always contact me, alekasky.com. You can text me from the phone number that's on my website. You can Facebook me. Aloha Healing Arts is my Facebook page. And if you have enough, I get enough questions, or if you want more information on any of this, you want to start a dialogue, you guys want to talk about this, let me know. I will set another one of these up and we can all join in and have a conversation. And then also stay tuned, get in touch with me if you want to learn astrology, if you would like to be able to look at your own chart and understand what makes you you and why you do what you do and what is your purpose, what is your passion, what is that you're meant to do. That is why astrology can help you. So if you want to know about that, I will be doing a class just like this where we'll be able to interact as well as, you know, teach from this platform. Just contact me and I will let you know those dates. I believe they're next month. So we will go from there. All right. Shine on, friends. We're in this together. I'll talk to you later.